Philly is a basketball town. When we see the kind of effort and the kind of grit that's put forth, we love it because that's who we are, and that's the kind of basketball that we embrace and cheer for.
We had something that no other city had. The 5 schools, they loved each other, but they hated each other.
You know, you teach through basketball, and basketball is something that I love. No matter how you do it, you do it.
About a year ago, Wallet Hub published an article ranking the top college basketball cities in the country. In the end, out of 292 cities, Philadelphia ranked number 7. Philly ranked higher than Boston, New York, and Washington, D.C., to name a few. This ranking led us to ask the question, why in a city known for its love of professional sports does college basketball appear to be the exception? OwlSports Update's team of reporters are going to look at this question over the next 45 minutes. The teams, the fans, the arenas, and the rivalries. It's this combination that puts Philly among the country's top college basketball cities. And we start with the cathedral of college basketball. Just about every Philadelphian has heard of the Palestra, often dubbed the birthplace of college basketball. The famous arena resides on the south side of Penn's campus and has been home to some of the nation's greatest college basketball games.
And it's still one of the iconic places in Philadelphia, and really one of the iconic places in the United States.
Football has Lambeau. Baseball has Fenway. But for college basketball, its unrivaled Mecca boasts less than 10,000 seats, and it sits in West Philadelphia.
From the 50s through to, I think you could safely say, the 90s, or by the end of the 20th century, the Palestra was the deal.
Known in legend as the Cathedral of College Basketball, the Palestra has played host to more games in NCAA tournaments than any arena in college basketball history. For Philadelphia, the Palestra is the common thread, the one venue, the one jewel every school and every fan can call their own. And that's because for decades, the Palestra was home to all of Big Five basketball before they had their own arenas.
Not only did we play each other, but we played each other and the other teams from outside all at one venue. That's why the Palestra is such an important part of Philadelphia college basketball. At one point, we all played all of our games at the Palestra.
And those games drew fans from all corners of the city, creating storied tradition and an unrivaled atmosphere that is still revered by many as the best there ever was.
The Big Five was a huge part of the fabric of our sports society in Philadelphia. Saturday nights at the Palestra, you did nothing but watch doubleheaders. And the best part about the doubleheaders was in the first game, invariably some powerhouse would come in to the Palestra and they would strut in with all their rankings and whatever. And invariably it seemed like whoever played them, LaSalle, St. Joe's Temple, Villanova, Penn, they ended up beating them. So Calvin Murphy came in with Niagara, Jim McDaniels came in from Western Kentucky, and they would leave losers. And then, if that wasn't enough, it would be St. Joe's Villanova in the nightcap, or it'd be Penn and Temple in the nightcap.
When the Palestra first opened in 1927, tickets for a game were just 55 cents. It was built for the sole purpose of watching basketball. Its bleachers are right on the court, and the limited seating created an environment that cannot be mirrored. Within the halls of the Palestra, there's a plaque that reads, "To win the game is great, to play the game is greater, but to love the game is the greatest of all." Players and coaches alike, the Palestra embodied that love for the game.
The great thing about the Palestra was there were just certain traditions, whether it was the streamers and the toilet paper that were thrown on the floor after the first basket by your team in the game. And then you would look to see that the corners of the Palestra were filled, because that was the indication. Those were the last seats that were sold, and that was the indication that the place was sold out. And then it would rock. by and large, a lot of these players were from the Philadelphia area, so there were already established rivalries to begin with. Then they would latch on to the local college team, and it would continue.
Fran Dunphy was one of those kids from the Philadelphia area who grew up on the rivalry. He played in the Big Five. He is the winningest coach in Big Five history thanks to his time at Penn and Temple. And now, he's about to write a new chapter as head coach at his alma mater, LaSalle.
One of my buddies' father took us to the Palestra for a triple header to see an NCAA tournament round. It's always been special to go there. It was special to go there as a youngster before I got into high school to watch games. During high school, I never got a chance to play there as a high school guy, but to go to games there was spectacular. And then when I got a chance to have the key to the front door, it was very, very special.
Of course, all good things must come to an end. While the Big Five is still a staple in Philadelphia, Villanova forced a change in the early 90s that moved many of the games away from the Palestra.
A lot of people will point to Villanova and their rise to prominence, and eventually Big East play then became much more important, or other teams that they could play outside of the city or outside of their conference that would enhance the reputation, would enhance their rankings, and so I think that was probably the beginning of the end. I don't think anyone should be blamed for it. I just think it was a natural evolution of basketball.
Generations later, the Palestra no longer plays host to the notorious round-robin games or fills up anywhere near the way it used to. But the Palestra remains a jewel, one that is still celebrated by today's basketball greats.
I find myself being pretty close friends with Greg Popovich, and when he would come to Philadelphia, he would on occasion have his team practice at the Palestra and just kind of walk around and soak in the history and tradition of Philadelphia college basketball, and certainly the Big Five.
Mike Krzyzewski, when he had Duke in town and he had some time off, even though they may be playing Temple at the Wells Fargo Center, would be sure to have a practice at the Palestra. So the older people who understand the roots of basketball are sure to go to the Palestra and pay their homage.
University of Pennsylvania is the Palestra's lone home team now, but it still serves as a relic, preserving the deep roots of college basketball within its halls. And to this day, it's still an arena that every college hoops fan in Philadelphia can call home.
When you circumvent the basketball court and you're in the corridors of the Palestra, all the pictures and all the memories that occurred in that building are absolutely stupefying.
And he's not alone. Part of the lore of the Palestra due to these Big Five tournaments, a long-standing Philly basketball tradition that shaped the landscape as we know it.
Philadelphia, the five schools, they loved each other, but they hated each other. They wanted to beat you, but then they could be your friend after the game or whatever. And the fact that they played in one venue, for the most part, just made it different.
Other cities, in my mind, missed the boat. Could New York have done this? Could Chicago have done this? Could Washington, D.C. have done this? Probably, but it took really some creative people who sacrificed for their own institution for the good of the greater good, and I'm glad that they did.
Penn, LaSalle, Villanova, St. Joe's, and Temple. The group constitutes the Big Five, a college basketball tradition that reaches back nearly 70 years.
It started in 1955. The schools were playing each other, but not necessarily in a round-robin kind of fashion. So it all came together in that year, and you couldn't do what they did in 1955 in 2000 or 2020 or 2022.
LaSalle had already won their NIT and their NCAA, and then Temple went to 2 Final Fours right after that. I think it was just, again, you had a community that valued basketball. I mean, Will Chamberlain came from here. Guy Rogers. I mean, Paul Arizin, Tom Gola.
The college game was kind of blowing up in the 50s. I think once those schools realized, hey, you know what, we're good individually, but we're better together, that this has a chance to be really something unique.
The round robin was formed in 1955. Each of Philadelphia's Division I programs would play each other once. Win the most games, you are the Big Five champion. A lot easier said than done.
The NCAA committee, we were told, the selection committee, used to value Big Five games differently. So if you lost a Big Five game or two, they didn't hold it against you as much as if you lost a non-Big Five game.
To truly understand the institution, it's important to know a little about the programs.
When I was a kid, it was Villanova beating Penn in the East Regional Final, 90-47 after losing to Penn 3 straight years. And Penn was unbeaten, ranked number 2 in the country. What Raleigh did in '85, nobody's ever going to forget that. Jay's 2 championships are great. They're great, tremendous. What they did in '85, a lot of people will always consider that with NC State to be like the 2 biggest upsets in NCAA history.
Jay Wright has pushed the Wildcats far ahead of the local competition. Already a Hall of Famer, and with over 500 Villanova wins to his name, he's rewritten the standards of Big Five glory. His 2 national titles would lead many to believe he's the greatest to ever do it. But perhaps no coach embodied the Big Five like Temple's own John Chaney.
John Chaney was just John Chaney. I had the pleasure of covering him for a long time, and never a dull moment with John.
The Owls Hall of Fame coach went to 5 Elite Eights and turned a commuter school in North Philly into a national powerhouse. All of that while playing in an institution that wouldn't have recruited him when he was a player in Philadelphia.
He grew up in Philadelphia in the public league. The Big Five was not recruiting black players. He had to go to Bethune-Cookman and Daytona Beach. And John always remembered that. That's why he wanted to give players an opportunity that he didn't have. He was all about giving opportunities to players. And he had this incredibly unique style of coaching. There's really nobody been like him before or since.
When I think of Temple in terms of basketball, I think of John Chaney.
Playing Chaney was not a lot of fun for Dunphy while he was at Penn, but that didn't stop his Quakers from churning out 10 Ivy League titles and reestablishing themselves as the premier Ivy program in the 90s and early 2000s.
And came, he resuscitated the program, made him into the Ivy League power, and it was just fascinating to watch him coach against Pete Carrill with those kind of teams. But yeah, that to me, the Alan Maloney teams with Barry Pierce, and they were really, really good basketball teams.
Jerome Allen, Michael Jordan, Matt Langle were backcourt guys. Jerome Allen and Matt Maloney played together in a 3-year stretch that was just terrific for us. We didn't lose any league games in a 3-year stretch. So there was some terrific players there.
Early on, LaSalle was the signature program. The Explorers' 1954 NCAA title set the stage for the Big Five, and their star, Tom Gola, is still regarded as one of the most dominated college basketball players ever. His time as a coach helped bring LaSalle into the national conversation again, as he led perhaps the best team to never win a title.
There are people still who will tell you that was the best team ever in Philadelphia history. Would they have been able to beat UCLA if they had gotten a chance? They lost 1 game. They lost to South Carolina in the tournament that was held in Philly that time over the Christmas holidays, and that was it.
We had a phenomenal team. We had some really great players. Phenomenal season. We lost 1 game to South Carolina, and we ended our season not going to the NCAA tournament because we were on a probationary 2-year struggle that we had, but a year that I will never forget.
Finally, the school that perfected the art of the regular season in 2004, St. Joe's. Known by older fans for producing NBA coaches like Jack Ramsey, Jack McKinney, and Jim Lynam, most Hoops fans can identify this school with Jameer Nelson, Phil Martelli, and the 2004 team that galvanized the nation.
That was probably of all the stories that I covered, the best story from beginning to end, because it went a whole season. And I knew they were going to be good. They beat Gonzaga in the opening game at the Garden. I remember calling Phil Martelli the next day. I said, I actually told him the next day, I said, I think you got a chance to go undefeated.
Finally, not Big Five members due to their jump to Division I hoops 20 years after the round robin was started, Drexel still holds a place in the Philadelphia basketball conversation.
In my mind, we probably should have given great thought to making it the Big Five plus 1 and have Drexel in there. Today's world, the Atlantic 10 has 14 teams, and the Big 10 has 14 teams, and the Big 12 has 10 teams. The Atlantic, whatever. All these leagues have way more teams or less teams than the number it says in their league title. So we could be the Big Five with 6 teams in it.
Overall, these city schools account for 4 of the 50 winningest schools in NCAA Division I history. Combined, the 5 programs have accounted for nearly 8,500 wins.
Here's how those wins break down. Temple University, who is the 5th winningest school in Division I NCAA history, leads the Big Five with 1,962. Villanova comes in second with 1,851, and Penn is right behind them with 1,813. St. Joe's has 1,668, and LaSalle has won the least amount of games in the Big Five with 1,408. The city of Philadelphia has an impressive number of wins, and with that success comes national recognition.
Philadelphia has long been in love with the game of basketball, but it's no secret that to truly capture the city's heart, you have to win, and winning is what Herb McKie does best. The legendary coach has racked up over 1,100 victories at what is now Thomas Jefferson University. Back when it was Philadelphia Textile, McKie led his alma mater to the 1970 Division II National Championship in just his 3rd year at the helm. But it didn't look like Philly Textile was heading for that storybook finish when it lost 2 of its first 3 games.
Coming back on the bus, the players came up to the front of the bus and grabbed me and said, "Coach, don't worry about it, we're not losing again." And people have said that before, but I said, "Okay, fellas, I'm with you." So, boom, here we go. We go off and we won like 28, 29 straight games. And we ran roughshod through the NCAA tournament, beat everybody by an average of like 20 points. They were the ultimate team. That's the way they were. They were just wonderful young men.
Just 2 years later, in 1972, it was another small school in the Philly area that grabbed the national spotlight. This time, it was on the women's side, and it began from the humblest of backgrounds.
Immaculata, first of all, was an all-girls Catholic school. Their gym had burned down. So we didn't have a gym, and all of our games that first year were on the road. So just to sort of give you an idea, we would have practice and, don't envision buses. I would sit there with my team and go, "Okay, do you have a ride? Do you have a ride? We'll all meet at wherever we're playing."
The Mighty Macs may not have had a gym, but they had talent, including a future 1,000-point scorer and 3-time All-American.
I'm watching several of these girls play, and I went home that night and said to my husband, I said, "I have Jerry West in girl sneakers." I mean, this one player was so impressive. Her name was Teresa Shank Grentz. Great coaches are made by great players. And she was the greatest player of that era. She was 72-2 when she played, 3 national championships. There's lots of other players that do not have those accomplishments.
That's right. From 1972 to 74, Kathy Rush, Teresa Shank Grentz, and the Mighty Macs won 3 straight NAIA national championships. After their 3rd title, the Mighty Macs would go on to play in front of the first national television audience for a women's basketball game. And during their dominant run, Immaculata became one of the hottest tickets in the Philly area.
Basketball had always been a big-time thing at the Palestra, the Big Five, and it was important to the city. At the time Immaculata was winning, a lot of the Philadelphia college pro teams weren't doing great. So all of a sudden, here comes Immaculata, wins a national championship out of nowhere. And, our games became happenings. We were getting publicity, we were winning, and people would say, "Hey, I'm going to go take a look at this Immaculata team."
Perhaps what made Coach McKie and Coach Rush's runs of success so special was the fact that they brought national acclaim to the place they came from. The same can be said of Tyrone Garland, the hero behind the game-winning shot that took LaSalle to the Sweet 16 back in 2013.
Yeah, growing up in Philly, I've been playing ball since I was 2 years old, so it's basically been my destiny to play basketball. I had the ball in my hand since I was a little kid, and growing up in Southwest Philly, it was just basketball. That's all I knew, day and night.
Garland graduated from John Bartram High School, the starting point for NBA players like Hall of Famer Earl the Pearl Monroe and fellow LaSalle alum Jelly Bean Joe Bryant. After beginning his collegiate career at Virginia Tech, Garland came back home to an Explorers team where he saw the potential for a special run.
I saw from the summertime, the practices, you could tell 3-hour practices only seem like 1 hour when you having so much fun with your teammates and we hung out. So once you get that bond with your teammates and knowing y'all all on the same chain, who knows what could happen.
What happened was the Explorers' most successful season since the days of Tom Gola. First, they toppled 2 ranked teams in the same week. Then they captured their first Big Five title in over a decade. After winning a play-in game, then upsetting Kansas State in Kansas City, Garland and LaSalle had their date with destiny against Ole Miss in the round of 32. Before the game, as he watched Ohio State's Aaron Kraft beat Iowa State with a game-winning 3, Garland's cousin Byrne advised him to implement the Southwest Philly floater to avoid getting his shot blocked. Sure enough, with the game knotted at 74 and LaSalle holding the final possession, Garland saw his opening.
Going in, we knew we was going to go at 6 and we was going to switch sides at 10. So that's how the play went down, and the rest is history. It's a great name, great shot, great interview. This is a classic for Philadelphia history and basketball. And when you got kids calling you the Southwest Philly floater and trying to imitate you, it's just a great thing.
Despite the fact that the exploits of Herb McKie and Kathy Rush and the heroics of Ty Garland came 40 years apart, something remains true. Philly loves a winner, especially a winner who reps the city with pride.
These Big Five schools have 131 combined NCAA tournament appearances. Villanova has the most with 41, Temple has 33, Penn has 24, St. Joe's has 21, and LaSalle is at the bottom with 12. Philly schools have a long history of success, and none of it would be possible without the coaches that have gotten them there.
John Chaney, Fran Dunphy, Herb McKie, Jim Lynam, Phil Martelli. This is just a partial list that includes some of the greatest basketball coaches to come out of Philadelphia. The Big Five and Philadelphia basketball has produced many coaches whose likeness reside in the Hall of Fame. At the top of the list is John Chaney, who was inducted into the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame in 2001, in the National Collegiate Basketball Hall of Fame in 2006, and whose statue sits in the lobby of the Liacouras Center, just feet from the basketball floor that bears his name. While Chaney passed away in January of 2021, his legacy lives on. Larry Doherty, Temple Athletics Senior Associate Athletic Director, worked side by side with Chaney for many years as his communications director. Doherty's stories help keep Chaney's legacy alive.
We played at Alabama. We went down there, but prior to that, the Alabama women's wheelchair basketball team asked if they could meet with Coach Chaney. So I knew Coach would do this, and I figured we'd do that before the game. And he said, no, let's do it after the game. He talked to these young women for 45 minutes while his team sat on the bus. And he signed autographs, took pictures. I saw behind the scenes how such a genuinely great, kind man John Chaney was.
Doherty is one of the few members in Temple's athletic department to work with Chaney and then with his successor in Fran Dunphy. The winningest coach in Big Five history spent 17 years at Penn before moving to North Broad, where he spent another 13 years. Dunphy, like many other coaches in Philadelphia, also played his college ball close by at LaSalle.
And I think Fran Dunphy was the perfect choice at the right time, because you're bringing in another Philadelphia Big Five legend to replace a Philadelphia Big Five legend.
Before coming to Temple, Doherty worked in the media relations office at St. Joseph's University, working alongside Phil Martelli, the all-time winningest coach in its program's history.
And watching him take a program that had been struggling to make it to the NCAAs or postseason and take them quickly into the Sweet 16 run, and then to become number one in the nation. And it's what he did there is you can't even put a value on how much he changed the culture there.
I've always been trying to give back to the game with the next group down, the next group down, next group down. I was able to attract quality people who happen to be good basketball players.
Working with Phil was tremendous. I mean, Phil has no ego. He treated everyone the same. His personality really lifted, St. Joseph's and brought him quickly into the limelight, back from where they used to be a national power in the 60s. and a team that upset DePaul with Jim Lynam in the 80s.
Jim Lynam took over St. Joe's in 1978. He was a part of the 1961 Final Four team. In 1963, he was the recipient of the Robert V. Giese Trophy, awarded to the best player in the Big Five.
If you're able to go to work every day and, really enjoy what you do, a lot of people, I think it's fair to say, a lot of people don't have that advantage.
Like Lynam, McKie stayed close to home in college, playing for Philadelphia Textile, now known as Jefferson University. He was the Boston Celtics' 62nd pick in the 1963 NBA draft, but he broke his fingers during training camp and decided to leave the NBA and come back to his alma mater as an assistant coach. When head coach Bucky Harris retired in 1967, McKie took over.
As far as the NBA thing was concerned, that might have been a lucky breaking my 2 fingers, but I always had the excuse that I broke 2 fingers on my head.
McKie retired from coaching just last month after 54 seasons at Jefferson, compiling a record of 1,144 wins with just 450 losses. He is the second all-time winningest coach in college basketball, trailing only Duke legend Coach K, who also retired this season.
Somebody actually said to me, Coach, now that Krzyzewski's retired, if you stayed on in coaching, you could be the all-time winningest coach in a couple of years. And I said, yeah, that's probably true. However, I don't do this to set records. Setting the record of most wins, and that doesn't mean anything. Most important thing is how good your team is, how good you did this year, did you make the tournament, and how well you did in the tournament. That's the key the whole time. For me, being here this long has enabled me to develop my ability as a coach, my reputation as a coach, to the point that I was inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame 10 years ago. And who knows what would have happened if I had tried bouncing from job to job.
Fran Dunphy, Jay Wright, John Chaney, and Phil Martelli are some of the best coaches the city has ever seen. Temple University's current head coach, Aaron McKie, is hoping to one day settle in among those names.
Here's a kid who grew up in North Philly, who, he was coached by John Chaney, and he had the kind of attitude that was not going to allow him to sit no matter what.
Long before his playoff runs in the NBA, 6th Man of the Year awards, and a college career that saw Aaron McKie start in all 92 games at Temple, may be odd to think now, the Philly native wasn't always sure Temple wanted him as much as he wanted it.
The one team that stood out to me was Temple University, obviously. I was being groomed to be a Temple guy, but I wasn't quite sure if Coach Chaney was there with me, while I was playing and in high school. I probably wasn't at the top of the food chain for him at that particular time. Finally, I got the call. Coach Chaney called me, and I was just super excited. And this is the place I wanted to be. This is the place I envisioned myself, because so many guys that he had on the team I idolized, growing up, and wanted to be just like those guys.
Someone who McKie wanted to be like was Mark Macon, who donned the cherry and white for 4 years prior to McKie's arrival. Macon elevated the Owls to their only #1 ranking in program history in just his freshman year and reopened a window of success for Temple basketball. But being from Michigan, Macon's journey to North Broad was more of a story of right place, right time.
Temple didn't recruit me. They were recruiting my teammate. Coach Chaney came and spoke at our little clinic, or our summer clinic. And when I saw him speak, I knew that's where I wanted to go. I recruited, or my coach and myself recruited them, meaning I wanted to come here, not them wanting me, because I didn't think they thought they could get me because of who I was and how highly I was being sought after. But that's where I wanted to go. I mean, my school of choice would have been Georgetown, bar none. But I saw Coach Chaney and pretty much fell in love with his teaching style.
Lacking a familiarity of Philly basketball, Macon learned quick, leading Temple to 3 straight Big Five titles and taking the team to the 1988 Elite Eight, the team's deepest run at the time since 1957.
When you were growing up, like before high school or anything like that, where you were getting recruited, did you have a perception of Big Five basketball, or?
Knew nothing about it. Knew nothing of what was going on in Philadelphia with the Big Five. Didn't even knew it existed. How about that? But in the Palestra, I don't know who we played. I really don't. I really don't know who the first game was. All I know is that the rims felt like the ocean. They were so big. I probably missed more shots than I've taken, you know what I mean? But to me, now, I don't know how many points I scored in there. I don't know. It was just great to me. It always seemed like the rims were big.
The late, great John Chaney's influence in recruiting both McKie and Macon was paramount, but Chaney's greatest impact on the pair of stars may have been the lessons they learned in life, the ones they took with them after they left Temple that helped them achieve success at the professional level.
So you had the best of the best as players, and you had the best of the best as coaches and mentors, all under one roof. And so we got a chance to see it every day, the best players, the best coaches, and it was a family. It was a family because everybody cared about one another.
He wanted us to be great citizens, to be great young men, to understand life, and to be able really to give back. To give back, that's your service. No matter how you do it, you do it. And so he was preparing us, and it wasn't a hard transition, you know, in terms of understanding that. But remember, you got a lot of young men that get a chance to play professional ball who don't understand the other things about it that come with it.
Macon was the bigger college standout. In fact, he still holds the school record for career points at 2,609, not to mention 6 years in the NBA. But Aaron McKie shined brighter at the pro level, especially during his time with the 76ers.
And he was a glue guy, so he gave the Sixers whatever they needed, whenever they needed it. I just remember time after time him, Aaron McKie, making a key defensive play at the end of the game, to save a game, to turn a game around, that sort of thing. In a year where Allen Iverson was the MVP, where Dikembe Mutombo was the Defensive Player of the Year, and Larry Brown was the Coach of the Year, Aaron McKie was Sixth Man of the Year, and deservedly so.
Even helping guide them to an NBA Finals run in 2001 while playing on a fractured ankle.
You don't take these things for granted. I mean, it's something that you prepared for all your life. Is one, playing at the highest level, two, going to the NBA Finals with my hometown team, and I envisioned this. I had dreamed about this stuff. And to get there and my ankle was bad, there was no way I was going, you know, miss the game. So it's a passion, it's a desire that you have in you to figure out a way.
And knowing Aaron McKie and what he's made of, the fact that he got that close, he was going to give all that he could possibly give, and then some. And as they say in cliche land, let the chips fall where they may, and if that happened to affect his career, well then, so be it. I don't think he lives with any regret. I'm positive of it.
McKie and the Sixers came up just short, taking Shaquille O'Neal and fellow Philadelphia product Kobe Bryant to 5 games in the finals. However, after successful careers in the NBA, both McKie and Macon are back at Temple, this time together and this time as coaches.
Coach asked me again, and I just said, you know, I'm going to try it out. Coach, I'll do it, you know. And I loved it because I was still doing exactly what I wanted to do, and that was teaching. I used education in basketball just the same way he did it. You know, you teach through basketball, and basketball is something that I love. Education is something that I love, but the education part that I love about it is the learning part. It's not always the giving part, it's the learning part. And so I'm constantly being a student. I'm constantly learning. I'm constantly giving little tidbits of what I learned back.
I never thought I would be a coach, period, because it's not where my mind was at while I was a player. And the ironic part about it is all the coaches that I played for always told me I was going to be a coach. You know, whether or not it was the person that I was, I always thought I was coachable and a good teammate. You know, was it I displayed leadership skills or characteristics? I don't know, but all my coaches would tell me that I'm gonna be a coach one day. And I just thought, you know, once I got into the pros and I was playing for a while, and like, you know, when I'm finished with this, then I want to go stick my feet in some sand and, you know, maybe play some golf 2-3 times a week and just kind of get away from it. But, you know, basketball kept calling. And, you know, here I am as a head coach at Temple University.
McKie may be one of the best players to come out of the Big Five, but growing up in North Philadelphia, he started out as a fan, one of the many passionate and proud throughout Philadelphia. College basketball in Philadelphia is nothing without its fans. So many schools with so many fans so close together.
The competition between the Big Five was very evenly spread, with some of the best talent in Philly competing head-to-head. The passion, intensity, and unforgettable doubleheaders helped in forming an atmosphere for fans that was truly electric.
The intensity of the fans is always going to be up here. Probably it's too high sometimes. But I think that, it's something you guys know already. The athletes that really resonate here are the ones that understand, like, I enjoy playing here because the fans care. And if they boo me, they're booing me because they're educated fans.
College fans in Philadelphia have a unique relationship that's been around for decades. 6 Division I teams that all sit miles apart.
So one that I've seen personally was actually when Temple came here when I was a freshman. I think it's the Cherry Crusade. They came, they had the building rocking right away. And it was the coach of Temple. It was his last game coaching against the Hawks. And we did our banner saying Dunphy, Big Five legend. And just see that respect. It's tough love, baby. It's brotherly love.
I think Philadelphia basketball history has made me learn and appreciate more and more about the city as I've lived here for now over 10 years. And I think it's one of those things that's absolutely in the fabric of the city.
There were double headers at times, and it was just energy in the building. It was fun, it was exciting.
I think there are certain people that have the Philly fan base all wrong. Philly is always going to be a pro sports town first, a college sports town second, no matter what some of the older fans in their 60s and 70s and 80s might say. They might have really fond memories of, like, I took the subway down to the Palestra and took the L there. It's great. That culture still exists, but it's still very much a pro sports town.
Amid poverty and violence in the city, there are many organizations that are dedicated to protecting the city's youth through basketball. One of these initiatives comes in the form of the Alan Horowitz Six-Man Center, a facility that will house the next generation of basketball players in Philadelphia.
There is no question that the city of Philadelphia is rich in basketball culture.
I think we're pretty dope. I don't know if anybody wants to admit it.
But basketball is also embedded into the DNA of Philadelphia's youth. And oftentimes, playing the sport can be an escape from some of the harsh realities of growing up in the city.
Death and poverty and just things of that nature that's just not conducive to positive outcomes. Unfortunately, that's the reality of it.
Kenny Holtzman, the CEO of Philadelphia Youth Basketball, noticed several other sports had youth programs except for one.
Why do we have nothing comparable?
In June of 2015, Holtzman developed PYB, or better known as Philadelphia Youth Basketball, a community-built empowerment organization that leverages the game of basketball to help today's urban youth overcome systemic issues in their areas.
This is about giving thousands of kids, especially lower-income kids of color, the opportunity to become their best selves.
But to allow these children to become their best selves, Holtzman knew that more had to be done. In 2021, PYB took its next step and announced plans to convert a 100,000 square foot building in the Nicetown section of North Philadelphia. This became the Alan Horowitz Sixth-Man Center that, when finished, will house 7 full basketball courts, a multimedia lab, classrooms, a financial literacy workshop, and so much more.
And the alternative is it's the streets, it's despair, it's not making much of oneself. The kid needs a shot to be great.
The $30 million project is still under construction and is expected to open in late 2022. The Sixth-Man Center is named after the actual sixth man himself and Alan Horowitz. Horowitz is the city's biggest Sixers fan, and he's donated $5 million to the project that bears his name.
The players themselves have told me that they were the underprivileged kids when they were young. I surely wanted to donate, my time and my money towards such a wonderful cause.
I don't think there could be too many resources when it comes to the community because, again, we need it.
And that's why Khadijah Bowens, a North Philadelphia resident and former Temple women's basketball guard, also runs her own youth basketball organization with her partner, Tashid Carr.
It means everything to me. It means everything to me because I'm a product of North Philadelphia. I was one of those kids coming up, tapped into my community as far as mentoring and giving back since as long as I can remember. And I almost feel like an obligation to do it because if we don't, then who will?
It's really about bringing the young kids together. We're trying to, combat gun violence. That's number one. But two, just trying to get a kid some substance.
According to Bowens and Carr, substance is key. PYB and the Sixth Man Center will need to bring in mentors who have the ability to break through to these kids.
It's crazy because you would think when you're giving positive things and you're pouring into it and the programs are free that people will come, but the harsh reality of it is our people sometimes, it's like pulling teeth. You gotta look like these kids, you gotta talk like them, you gotta sometimes dress like them, you have to meet them where they are because we want the buy-in. And we always use basketball because this is a basketball city.
The Sixth Man Center and the Khadijah Bowens Foundation have the same mission. It's all about the kids who grow up around record gun violence and who live in poverty.
We come up with so much trauma and we begin to normalize the things that we see that aren't necessarily normal. I grew up in this neighborhood where we're doing this interviews where I used to play basketball. To have a place like this for the kids to come to and feel safe and can play basketball is necessary.
And although basketball and these programs cannot fully wipe away these burdens, the sport does have the ability to bring light and hope into a child's life, allowing them to not only obtain substance, but to also rally around a sport that is so important to the fabric in the city of Philadelphia.
It's easy to get lost in the complex and rich history of Philadelphia basketball. It's not just the Big Five, not just the proximity of these Philadelphia schools, not just the cathedral of college basketball in the Palestra, and not just the fans. It's the combination of all of these factors that has Philly among the best college basketball cities in the country. And while this tradition and following changes with time, it is without question for the love of the city.
Whatever makes the fans happy and we can bring everybody together for a moment to enjoy competitive sports, I think it's always great. I think it's a release for us in watching sports, football, basketball, baseball, whatever it is. And it's a common bond that we all have. We all enjoy sitting down, talking sports, and sometimes positive, sometimes negative, you know what I mean? But it brings us together.
The intensity of the fan base here is always, I think, going to be at this level. And I think the athletes do respond to that. I think the college athletes respond to that too.
Basketball is huge here in the city. I don't know about number 8, but we definitely are huge on basketball.
Phil Martelli is Phil's one of, there's only one Phil. There's only one Fran Dunphy. There's only one Jay Wright. I covered Raleigh a little bit. He was a very unique individual, but John Chaney was just John Chaney. I had the pleasure of covering him for a long time and never a dull moment with John.
It was a great, and it is to this day, a great city series because you got the competition in the city. And it was for bragging rights. Some are bragging rights, literally. Nowadays, Villanova holds that down, and respectively, they do because they have a great team. You want to be the team that gets to brag for the summer. No matter what goes on during the year, you get to brag for the summer. You want to make the playoffs, you want to get into the NCAAs, but you do definitely want to have those bragging rights. And again, the competition was just so fierce.